Welcome, everybody, to the Investors Podcast 2.0 Wealth Mindset, where we dive into the minds of the successful real estate entrepreneur to uncover the tips and tricks that have allowed them to keep moving forward. I am your host, Scott Bauer, and I'm excited that you're here with us. Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of the Invest This Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bauer. I'm excited today. I'm excited most days. Number one, I'm excited because you showed up here to listen to this podcast, and of course, that's the most important part. And number two, we got Adam Dahlberg with us. We're going to talk about a unique selling opportunity that you're not going to want to miss. And as always, I'm super grateful that you're tuning into us. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the podcast. Share it with all your friends so that they can get the same value that you're about to get out of this thing. And Adam, welcome to the call, man. How are you?
I am great. Thank you. Thanks for the invite, Scott.
Absolutely. I'm excited about today. Why don't you go ahead, give the listeners a little bit more about your background and kind of what you're focused on now.
Sure. So I'm an agent here in Arizona. I've been licensed for about 5 or 6 years, and started off really doing mostly wholesale acquisitions. Got licensed, obviously, just to have another avenue, when you're dealing with sellers and dealing with clients. Been focusing a little bit more on traditional real estate the last couple of years, but for the most part, my background mostly involves fix and flips, wholesales, creative investing, and just trying to figure out how to best solve our clients' issues. We're problem solvers. In fact, that's what I have on my business card is, that's what I am basically, is how I try to frame my approach to sellers is, hey, we're here to solve whatever problem you have. And so as the years go on, I've just tried to develop more and more strategies, to deal with our clients and their unique situations. And now that the market is so competitive on the wholesale and fix and flip here in Arizona, you kind of have to have that extra edge, and you have to have a little bit more creativity, when it comes to how to take these deals and how to get through the tough parts of them. So,
Adam,
other people might just leave on the table.
What's that?
That other investors and other wholesalers might just leave on the table or not know about. We're trying to always be as creative as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the creative space is certainly one that is unique, and not a lot of people know about it. So if you do understand it and you're able to present that to a seller, you have the competitive advantage. But I'm curious, what's the most unique creative deal that you've ever done, or something that you can share with the listeners that maybe gives them an insight on what type of deals you're talking about?
I just worked with a couple guys not too long ago. In fact, just within the last couple of months, where we did a house swap, basically. So there was a large property out in the East Valley on, I think it was like 1.5 acres of land. The home was just, it was a disaster. I think at one point it started off as a single wide trailer, and eventually over the years became this like 5,000 square foot monstrosity that was just hodgepodge of, we've all been in them, right? It's like 7 different apartments, but it's all one big house. And so the seller on this property didn't even live there. He had his wife and a couple kids living there, and they just needed something different. The house is kind of fallen down around them. And so I worked with some guys to help get that property, in contract. And then before we could close on it, they needed another house. So these same guys I was working with on a construction project, and then we're actually in the same office building here, was just finishing up rehab in the same vicinity, in a nicer gated neighborhood. And so we were able to kind of work basically a trade for trade. There was this big 5,000 square foot house on land. They wanted a nice little 3-bedroom, 2-bath in a tile stucco neighborhood. And so there was really no money exchanged. There was a little bit in closing costs and some other things, but in fact, the seller is able to even get a little bit of money back out of it. And then what was left on the note, they did a seller finance, and everything worked out great. So it was pretty creative, because there was no way that he was going to get financed for anything. His kids couldn't get financed for anything. He was in a real bad credit situation. And so here was a seller carry type scenario where, we were able to do a trade for trade. That was pretty cool. That took about a month to put together, but it worked out best for everybody.
Yeah, so I love that. That's very unique. I've tried to put those together before, and I've never been successful with it. Matter of fact, every time it seems like one or the other doesn't work, right? I have a seller that's willing to do it, but can't find a buyer or something to swap with it. There was one guy in particular in Mesa, I remember, he was at a retirement community, and he wanted to swap his house out, and we couldn't put the deal together. So hats off to you for being able to put that together. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so that's pretty neat. I've been buying up a lot of trailers as well, like manufactured homes out here. A lot of my traditional business is geared around just where I'm based locally out in East Mesa, Gilbert area. We have a lot of, 55 communities out here. And so, those people, they get older, they get to a point where they just can't handle the maintenance on the home. They don't want to deal with the stairs. They don't want to deal with the yard work. Unfortunately, somebody might pass away or go to an assisted living. And so I've been actually purchasing up a lot of mobile homes out, even in parks, and renovating those, and then helping the traditional older clients sell their bigger home and move into something that's more manageable and a little bit more, I guess, suited for being, in that age bracket, I guess. No maintenance, HOA takes care of the front,
right.
That type of stuff. So some other creative stuff too. I call that kind of a house swap, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, definitely. What do you find it to be advantageous to have for the listeners out there, to have your real estate license, to be, on the retail side, retail facing, but still have the knowledge and experience of the investment side? Or do you find it advantageous to have both, to be able to?
I do, but that's what I was kind of taught when I was coming up in the business, was there's no disadvantage to being an agent, right? You get access to the MLS, you get access to the tax records, you get access to all the forms. You have a broker that you can go to in situations where you might be a kind of a weird scenario. And I guess the biggest debate is not doing it that I've ever heard. When you read people's blogs and stuff, they're like, well, you have to abide by all the ethics and all the laws of being an agent. What the hell's wrong with that?
You should do that anyways, right?
Why do you want to try to skirt around, well, you could lose your license by doing it. Well, then that's not the deal I want to be involved with anyway, ethically. So to me, there's really no disadvantage other than the, $1,000 a year they kick you in the shins for, and fees and access to this stuff. But, it far makes up the difference. Now, if somebody's just getting into the business, of course you don't have to, you can find access to these simple 1-page, 2-page contracts and all of that. But I find it, when I'm dealing with clients, I find it a lot easier to let them know, hey, listen, we're all licensed agents and brokers here. We have to abide by all the legalities of that. We could lose our entire business by being unethical in your deal. And why would we want to jeopardize that? We have all the Arizona approved forms. It just makes them, I think, feel a little bit more comfortable from an acquisition standpoint.
Absolutely. No, I can totally understand that. And from a seller side, I'm sure that's true. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we talked about today for the listeners out there is a unique selling opportunity, or a way that you and I have been able to work together on a couple of deals, but it's a unique way to sell. And it's something that I was unsure was even around, but it's something that makes a lot of sense. Can you give the listeners a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah. So our auction program is something that's, it's been around for, auctions have been around for thousands of years, right? Or hundreds of years, at least. It's because they work. And so we are able to take homes in many different aspects of the investment side. And let's just talk direct to seller right now, and then we can go into some of the other ways that this has been useful. But in the direct to seller areas of trying to sell, there's a lot of people out there that just don't want to deal with doing a traditional listing. And that's okay. When I go out and talk to a seller, I say, hey, look, here's 5 different ways that we can approach this. And every direction that we go just has a different set of rules, right? You want your cash in a week, we can make that happen. If you want to put this on the market and see what you can bear, you're going to be dealing with agents and showings and, inspections and all that type of stuff, but you're going to get a little bit of money for the home possibly. And there's, all the other things that we can kind of do, but, the auction is kind of a hybrid model, right? So what it is, it's all the benefits of selling to a wholesaler or to an investor, but with the price point right around the same as what you would make if you were to do a traditional type of a listing, maybe a little bit lower. But for the most part, we're seeing homes sell through the auction process between 85 to 93% of value. Now, if you take that same 85 to 93% and you factor in 1 or 2 points for negotiation on the price, plus your BINSR, plus your 6% in broker fees, plus your closing costs, plus, you get a VA buyer, or you get somebody that can't, your FHA buyer, you need to pay their closing costs. There's another couple points. So at the end of the day, you're walking away with 10, 12% less than really what you listed your house for. Maybe not so much in today's market if you got a bidding war going on, but the concept is still the same. There's a lot more involved when you're listing it. So with the auction program, what we do is we We run your home through an online real estate auction. And the biggest hurdle to get over for our sellers is this isn't a foreclosure auction, right? This isn't courthouse steps. I can't, neighbors are going to think I'm losing my home. It's going to sell for pennies on the dollar. What we're doing is we're selling these homes to mostly out of state buyers or investors that are high income earners or typically higher net worth type buyers. The company that we use here in the Valley, they're the longest selling auction selling company in Arizona. They've been around over 75 years. They literally have tens of thousands of high net worth buyers all over the world, rather. They got their start selling industrial buildings, industrial equipment, huge vacant land, giant, $1 million cabins. And so their buyers that they have in their Rolodex are used to buying stuff big, expensive, and for cash, right? So the way the auction program works is instead of you coming in as an investor, we got to buy our homes at a great value. I mean, if we're buying 70 cents on the dollar, that's a pretty standard kind of number that we kind of throw out there, 70 to 80%. And the seller it just doesn't work for them, whether they just don't have enough equity in the property, they just can't put their head at the pillow at night and go, I can't just legitimately walk away from that much cash. It just doesn't work for me. But I can't list it for X, Y, and Z. I got, right now, afraid of the COVID, right? They're afraid. They have kids doing homeschooling, online schooling. They got a ton of pets. They have sick relatives at home. Whatever reason is, they just can't do a standard listing. So the hybrid is, here's the deal. Let's run it through the auction. You pick your own closing date, meaning when the auction is going to be. You can set your reserve price. So if you only owe, you've only been in the house 3 or 4 years and it's worth $300,000 and you owe $270, well, we know we can't go below $270. It's kind of like eBay, right? It's kind of like your buy it now or your reserve price. There's no showings, there's no inspections. The buyer, the person that is bidding on it at the auction, is buying it as is. The buyer is paying all the closing costs. The buyer is paying the buyer premium to the auction company. So the seller actually gets 100% of the proceeds. So when the gavel hits and it hits at 275, the seller's actually getting 275. There's nothing coming on the top of that. Unlike a traditional listing where you're paying, all those fees we just talked about. And because most of the people that are buying these homes are regular retail buyers anyway, meaning they're either looking for secondary homes out in Arizona, they want to retire out here, they want to buy something to maybe fix up or rent for a couple of years and then move out here and fix up and live in and retire. You have a lot of people that are buying stuff out here in Arizona for Airbnbs. What are you going to do if you live in Canada or you live in the Midwest or you live in the East Coast? You're not flying out here every weekend with your agent and driving around and looking at stuff in the MLS. So everything that you're going to be doing is online. And if you as a buyer, as a retail buyer, if you're used to buying on the market or on the MLS through an agent, you're already used to paying 100% of retail anyway. And now if the house is a good deal, you're paying 102, 103% if you get into a bidding war. So if you save 5-10% on the purchase, that's a win to you as a retail buyer, right? But it's also a win to the seller because they don't have to deal with the experience of actually putting on the market and dealing with agents. They know they can close their house in 2 weeks. They can close it in 45 days. They can close it in 60 days. It really doesn't matter. You pick when you want the auction to be. The auctions, we do them once a week. So, you want this week, that week, the next week, it's really up to you. That's basically it in a nutshell.
It doesn't make any sense to me why somebody wouldn't do that, right? From a seller standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. I have closed a couple of deals this way, and it's worked out very well. What is the timeline, the average timeline that you see for these sellers in order to get from A to Z? 30 days? 45?
Yeah, we can do them as quick as 2 weeks. The auction itself is a 5-day auction online. So just like if you bid on something on eBay, the auction opens up and then it closes 5 days or a week later. And then you really probably need about at least a week to 2 weeks to market the home. But really the sweet spot is 30 days to do the marketing for it. And that's because you got to remember, we're marketing this to tens of thousands of people, not only all across Arizona, but all across the country and really all across the world. A person that just bought our house out in Prescott Valley was out of, I think they were out of Canada or something, out of Vancouver. They wanted a winter home down here. We get people, from the Midwest and back east that are, looking at these things. And so it just takes, 3 or 4 times to hit them if they're, marketing through email. I know the auction company, they just sold a house last year out in Falcon Field that had it wasn't a house, it was a hangar or whatever. It was something which, people parked their plane cars and stuff. And, you know, they did marketing and pulled out a full page in a aviation magazine. You know what I mean? So they actually spend thousands of dollars, at least a couple $1,000s in marketing for each property, which is the responsibility of us and the auction company. We don't charge the seller any of that. That's kind of the gamble on our end, right? So we're that confident that the property is going to sell. We're that confident it's going to meet their reserve price that we're actually willing to put a couple $1,000s on the line for marketing. And then you have to remember, you're not just marketing to the people here in your market. Whereas if you were to put a for sale sign with an agent out in your front yard, the only people really buying that are people that are driving around in your market or they're looking locally. We're reaching people globally. So you're just opening up your options to so many more people than if you were just to put a sign out for an agent, through a broker.
You know, it's so unique, and especially in today's world that is not only, you know, international and connected via the internet, but now with COVID and everything like that, people don't want to, you know, communicate or talk to each other, be close to each other. This now probably opens your door. You're probably busier than ever with this opportunity because now you're able to reach a lot more people that are sitting at home. You're able to sell properties at a higher price, so you're not only benefiting the seller, but also benefiting, you know, a buyer as well that's out there looking from their home.
Sure.
There's a lot of benefits that I can see that come out of this thing.
You know what's crazy? I was just talking with George right at the kind of first month that this COVID kind of shut everybody down, and I was kind of nervous. I'm like, man, are we over? Like, you know, like we all are just trying to figure it out, right? The first few weeks, and he goes, "You're not gonna believe it, man." Because they auction off more than just houses. I mean, they auction off gun collections and you know, high end you know, historic cars and, you know, classic cars and all sorts of different property. Because I'm busier than ever because people are bored. They have nothing to do. They're not working. They're, you know, they can't go anywhere. So they just sit at home and buy stuff online all day. I mean, look at the stock. Look what happened to Amazon. You know what I mean? It went through the roof. All this online businesses that kind of came up. Same thing with the auctions, man. People are going on there. And if you're just an auction person, you're sitting there looking at that stuff as it comes through. So yeah, the auction house and on the auction real estate side is busier than ever. Yeah. And getting better prices too, because of the competitiveness of the market right now.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this from a mindset standpoint for the sellers. What, you know, you mentioned that they get kind of hesitant when you talk about an auction. They think that it's like, you know, courthouse steps. You mentioned, you know, not wanting to think that or let their neighbors think they sold it for pennies on the dollar, et cetera, et cetera. What other mindset barriers have you had to kind of overcome with these sellers in order to get deals like this done?
To go through the auction process?
Right.
Just that they don't know if they're going to get what they want for the home. You know, they're nervous that their reserve price won't be met. And then if it's not met, then they're going to be forced to take the price that's, you know, that's given, and then they're going to get evicted out of their house. So that would be the biggest challenge to overcome. And all of that is, I mean, they're completely protected with the paperwork and with the you know, the listing agreement and so on and so forth. Nobody's there to kick anybody out of the house. And in fact, for the auction, any auction company, whether you're auctioning cars or furniture or houses or whatever, the last thing you want is a reputation that somebody bids on a home, it doesn't sell, or it doesn't meet the reserve price, and you have to pull off the auction. Because as a bidder, like, you're going to be pissed, right? Because you just invested a week in bidding and watching your bid and going in there, and all of a sudden it goes, it didn't meet the reserve. So you lose a lot of credibility in the auction space, in the auction world, is if you put something out there and it doesn't sell. So the auction company won't even take the bid if they're not confident that it's going to sell at the reserve price. And in fact, why would they throw their own money away? Like I just mentioned, they're spending a ton of money in marketing and so on and so forth, reaching out in time and you know, calling up, you know, bidders and calling people across the, you know, country that they think that this house will be a good fit for, and getting them excited and doing what auction companies do, getting in their face, calling them up, building that excitement level. I mean, we've all watched, you know, Barrett Jackson, and you got the call guys getting in people's faces, and you got to get it. That's what these guys do, because they're trying to get the value of the home up. Don't forget, Scott, that the auction company only makes a percentage of what the house sells for. So the interests of what we're doing through the auction and the interests of the seller are aligned in this scenario, because it's both of our incentive to drive the price of the house up as much as possible to get a higher value or higher percentage of commission to the auction company. And also, it's for the seller, just makes sense. You want to get as much out of the house as you can. Unlike two other scenarios, unlike traditional real estate, where you're represented by an agent who just wants to get the house sold, and you have a buyer's broker who's trying to do the best they can for their client and try to get the house as low as possible. And they're going to do that through various different ways that you do, and huge Vinzers and negotiating and so on and so forth. It's everybody's job on the other side traditionally to try to give the seller as little money as they can for the house. And it's even more so in our wholesale world, right? I mean, we want to go in there and get the best value that we can because we're buying it sight unseen. We go in there, and how many times have you ripped a kitchen sink off and you go, oh, shit, there's mold under here that you didn't know about on the inspection or whatever, and I got to blow a whole wall out. So we have to get it where there's enough buffer that if we come across something unknown, we can cover that. But in the auction, it's completely different. You have bidders that are bidding on this home, and bidders there's a term in the auction world called bidding fever, where egos get involved, people's excitement level gets involved. And they're fighting against each other to bring the value of that home up. Whereas in other scenarios, everybody's after the seller to try to get the house as low as possible. Here you have people, trying to like be the biggest guy on the block, trying to drive the value of the house up. We all remember property wars. Same thing. But instead of buying these houses at 50 cents on the dollar, these guys are buying them at, much, much higher value, retail value. And so, once you explain it to the seller like that, I think that they kind of understand it. But that is kind of the biggest hurdle to get over, other than, my neighbors are going to think I'm losing my home and then it's going to auction. It's not like that at all. So I think that would be kind of the biggest hurdle. And then the next thing is, and this is just minimal, not really a big deal, but they think that it's a scam, right? Because it's new. It's not, again, auctions have been around for hundreds of years. And why? Because they work for the advantage of the seller. But because this is kind of a new thing, nobody's, seen it before, they just think that you're trying to get them roped into like a long-term listing or something, and that's not it either. So those are the two biggest challenges. But if you explain it to them, I think they get over it.
It's just a lot of education, then, it sounds like. You got to educate these sellers on what's going on, what really they're getting into. Once again, I've always wondered, since you originally brought this idea to me, it's like, well, why don't more people do this? Why isn't this more on a national side of things? Because it makes a lot of sense, especially when you're cutting out, the showings. You're cutting out you're getting still the highest value you can for the seller, but you're cutting out all of the middle stuff in between a traditional listing will put out there, like the showings, like the inspection, like the Benzer, like things like that.
Yeah, and it's as is. Everything, so get back to that. So, it's as is. Just step back. We do one showing. It's the day before the auction closes. You have to be a registered bidder to bid, and it's real bidders too. I think you have to pay. It's like, depending on the price of the home, $200 to $300 to enter the bid, right? So you have to have a little bit of skin in the game as a bidder. That eliminates all the riffraff, the tire kickers, the people that are just coming in there to, put fake bids in or drive the price up or, get shady. So you put a couple $100 in, the auction company will vet you and make sure that you have proof of funds or that you're a legitimate bidder. And then once you become registered with the site, then you become, a registered bidder with a bid number or, a client number. And so, as you're putting your bids in, it's showing just kind of your bid number, not your name or anything, and the seller can watch this live. If you log in, they'll give you access to your auction on the back end, and you can watch the bids kind of trickle in over the first few days. The day before the auction, the gavel comes down. We'll typically go out and do like a 2-hour 2-3 hour open house at the home, if that's okay with the seller. I've only had one time where they didn't want that, but we would come to a 2 or 3 hour open house, take the sellers out, give them a gift card to go get lunch, put a card table out there. The registered bidders will come down, sign in, they can walk the property, because if you're buying a $400,000 house in Comic Ranch, you probably want to see it. And then that's it. The next day, I've seen the value double and almost close to triple within the last like 12 hours of the bid. And so that's, kind of the way that it works. So there is a little bit of an open house or a little bit of a showing, but certainly not like, there's no lockbox on the front door. There's no, random agents just calling, hey, I was just in the neighborhood, saw your sign. You mind if I stop by? All the things that come with competitive retail market. And so that's it. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense for a seller and for some other issues too here that maybe your clients might have some interest in.
So, I mean, where do you see this going? Do you think that this could have the opportunity to blow up even more than it is now? I mean,
Well, I
especially in the
certainly hope so. We're
right.
investing a lot of time and energy into it, so I certainly hope so. But again, as an acquisition person, it's a really good tool to have for your clients. To be good at acquisitions, you kind of have to be good at dispo, right? And everyone's like, oh, this, back when you first started, I'm sure, and we all first got in this business, we did everything, right? We did acquisitions, we did dispo, we did our own marketing, we did our own, and it's just so competitive now that you kind of almost have to specialize in one area of this business. It's very difficult to do it all anymore because it's just so much. There's just so much competition out there that you have guys that are just full-time on the phones, boiler room style, just finding buyers, building their buyers lists. And then you got the acquisition people there's so many more options now than there were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's why I'm not so really worried about this whole crash that everyone thinks is coming. It's 2007, 2008 all over again. A good buddy of mine was like, dude, are you kidding me? Like what we have available to us now in an investment world, we didn't have any of that. You had buyers or investors that would go down to the courthouse steps when houses foreclosed. I mean, now we have creative financing and every wholesaler out there, that's willing to buy these things and all the iBuyer stuff. And it's just, so I'm not really too worried about it. Plus our low inventory, plus Arizona's just a great place to live. So maybe the rest of the country might have some huge effects of the fallout of this, whatever ends up happening with this coronavirus. I don't think we're going to have a huge hit in Arizona, but that's just me. However, there will be people that are going to lose their homes. There will be people that, have rental properties that they just can't hold on to anymore because they haven't gotten rent in 6 months. And this is a really good option for those people because the same thing is going to be happening to people in California and people in New York and people in Jersey that are paying 3, 4, 5 times the price for a home that they can afford out here, but they just don't have the means to get out here to shop, right? They don't have the, so here's an option. You can do it all virtually.
Right.
Do it online. And so I think I kind of forgot what you had asked me there, but
just blow, getting bigger, making it a bigger,
getting bigger, right.
I know that I really appreciate you sharing, and I'm sure the listeners do too, because this is once again this is something different. Most listeners probably haven't heard of this before, especially if you're in the Arizona market. This is a great opportunity. You can sell properties for quite a bit higher value. So there are certain deals that you and I have done where I wasn't able to sell them in any other way. And this was a creative way that we could put it together because it is creative.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think I approached you with that, when I was last year or something, right before all this hit. And I just said, hey man, just throw me your dead leads, right? Send me a couple of guys that maybe, you tried to do a deal on and you were 10, 20 grand away from making it a deal. Not because you were trying to get them, you were trying to put the screws to them and get them as low as you could, but from a wholesale perspective or from a fix and flip perspective, like we have a spreadsheet, right? We plug it in. If it comes out green, it's a deal. If it comes out red, it's not a deal. And if we start to deviate off that spreadsheet, that's when we start getting ourselves into trouble.
Right. Exactly.
So at the end of the day, the numbers are what they are for the seller. And there's a lot of times that I've gone and spoken with a seller and been honest with them. They're like, look, man, like you don't want what I can give you when it comes to like this quick cash thing. Like I've talked myself out of way more deals than I've ever talked myself into because it's just not right for the seller, right? Whether they think it's not right, or maybe I could convince them that it's right, but it's not. Ethically, I'm like, there's a better option for you. And I'm going to make some money off of it anyway, going through the auction process. So why not get the most money for them if that's what their goal is to try to maximize, their outcome financially. The deals that are great, for us are the people like, hey man, I don't care. I just inherit it. I want it done. Take everything that's in it. Your price is great, right? How often do we get those? 1% of the time.
Yeah, right.
So that's why I said, hey, Scott, if you're off, 10, 20 grand, from where they need to be, let's talk to them. And we've gotten some deals out of it, right? I mean, we've gotten some good deals. Maybe, it's just not always right to just walk away from another option. That kind of leads me to my next point that I wanted to bring up was I'm assuming that a majority of our listeners today are probably not clients that want to sell homes, that are looking to sell their homes, are probably other investors that are, getting tips. And I listen to your podcast, so I know who's on. Yep. So same thing, right? Like I'm not going to sit here and beg and say, give me all your dead leads, although I will take them. We've got a couple people in this room over here that do nothing but hardcore follow-up. But if you're an investor yourself and you're a fix and flip guy, how often have you closed on a house or you got a good deal that came your way and it's like, hey, listen, you know, you got to close on the in a week. You take it down and then you got to sit on it for a month or two because your contractors are tied up, you know, somewhere else, or, you know, you just don't have the resources to get to the home right away, or you close on it and there's a 30-day or 45-day post-possession. Got one right now. We got a 90-day post-possession on it. It just boggles my mind. But why not maybe run it through the auction? You're not going to lose, right? So you buy a house, and let's just use fake numbers for a minute. Let's say you buy a house, it's for $200,000 and it's worth, you know, $300,000 when you fix it up and it needs 50 grand worth of work. And how often do we come, those deals don't exist anymore, but let's just say they did. What if you were to put that thing on the auction? You know, you can't work on it for 30 days anyway. What if you were to come to us and go, hey, you know, Scott, Adam, we want to run this house through the auction. I just closed on it. I can't get to it for 30 or 45 days. What do you think I could get? You as a fix and flip guy, if you were to put this house through the auction process, knowing it's just going to sit there and you're going to pay interest anyway, and you were to make an extra $10,000 or $15,000 off of it for not even having to send your contractors over there, is it worth it? It's going to sit there anyway, right? It's just a liability that could burn down or somebody could break into or vandalize. So why not do a 2-week auction on it and just see what happens? You set your reserve price and you do it that way. Same thing if you have tenant occupied homes. You have a house in contract. You know, maybe you don't want to close on it. So what we do is we figure out a marketing. You have to get something signed by the tenant or by the owner. Say, hey, and it's in most assignment, or it's in most wholesale contracts anyway. But you know, we have rights to market the home while it's in escrow and da 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 da. Let's run it through the auction. Like maybe that's a perfect fit for somebody that wants to buy a home, you know, and rent it out for a couple of months or even a couple of years and then retire and move out here to Arizona where their kids are, you know. And now you have a tenant that you don't have to evict because you have a built-in tenant. You know, the guy that buys says, no, leave them in there, man. They're paying rent on time. That's cool. I'll just sign a 2-year lease with them and be done with it. So there's scenarios where this would come in a very handy for your listeners that are in maybe unique situations. They just go, what am I going to do with this? You know, I got a tenant that's got kids. I don't want to evict them. You know, I don't want to deal with that. You know, this might be an option. Or again, you know, something, I just don't want the liability of this thing sitting vacant for 60 days. I can make it 10 grand on it for not doing nothing, you know?
That's what I'm saying, man. It's a great and unique process, and it's something that I'm glad that I was able to bring you on the show to talk about today, because, you know, it's something that every listener out here that's listening to this podcast, I'm going to go ahead and say, is going to be able to use this potentially. So,
right. You're going to come across every wholesaler on here, every fix and flip guy on here will at some point in the next year have some scenario pop up where they're like, I just don't know what to do. You know,
oh, absolutely.
Call you, call me, we'll figure it out, right? We're good at those unique things, you know. In fact, that's what we thrive off of is the creative type of stuff, you know. And this is just one of those things.
Well, you know, I just think it's we so it's not even just a thought, right? It really works. Like I said, we have closed a couple of deals. I know that you're actively doing it. I know that it can help not only, you know, if you're an investor like you were just talking about, but also homeowners out there that are trying to sell in, you know, top price, et cetera, all the stuff we already talked about. There's a lot of benefits to doing this. So I'm going to encourage all you listeners out there to reach out. We're going to make sure to add his information on the show notes page so that you can, you know, easily reach out to him to get some more information. But I mean, it's brilliant, man. It really is. Adam, thank you for sharing that with us today. Are you ready for a lightning round?
Oh, sure.
All right. I'm glad that we're going to catch you off guard here. So first question is pretty simple. I mean, how important do you feel mindset is in order for you to keep moving your business forward, especially at times like we have today?
Mindset and routine are two very important things as far as in business, and two things that I was never really good at until I realized I was missing out on a lot of opportunity. So extremely important. You gotta be ready. You gotta have your mindset. You gotta have a routine before you go to bed, a routine when you wake up in the morning, and just take every day kind of, you know, in our world, man, we're getting our balls kicked in on a regular basis. So if you have a goal in mind, yeah, very important. You can stay the course if you have your goal in mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Are you an avid reader? What's the last book that you read? What did you learn from it?
Man, I'm more of a podcast guy, but the book I'm reading right now is 7 Levels of Communication. There's a book that was given me by my broker like 2 years ago, and it's been sitting on my nightstand for the last couple of years, and I just finally got around to opening it up. But yeah, it's good so far. Never Split the Difference was another one too that I really enjoyed reading a couple of years back.
Probably one of the best books if you're in sales that you should ever read. Matter of fact, I think everybody should read that book. What a brilliant guy, and what a great book. I've read it 3 times myself. Great book.
Mhm.
What are you trying to learn right now? Anything in particular?
Well, how to have more patience when it comes to some of these deals. You always want to get everything done right away. It's difficult sometimes with sellers, when you're working with them, because we're all trying to grab at the lowest hanging fruit. And over the last 2 years, it's become very, very competitive, and you have to learn sometimes just to kind of step away from a deal and just let it kind of work itself out, and let the other guy kind of follow his own sword basically, because there's a lot of overpromise and underdeliver guys in this business when it comes to working with sellers. And so just staying consistent and staying patient with them and letting them kind of make their own decision, because they're getting bombarded on a daily basis. Yeah. And how many fix and flips do you get calls from wholesalers saying they want to buy all the time, right? There's nobody in the Metro Valley. There's nobody in Maricopa County that hasn't been called 3 times this year to try to sell their house from dialers and call guys and flyers and so on and so forth. So, but the guys that really do it and really know their numbers and really know the business, there's a very small circle of these people. And obviously you're in that circle, and there's a lot of upstart guys out there that just haven't gotten it yet. And so they overpromise, they underdeliver, and eventually the sellers will come back to you if you're patient. But if you try push them and pressure them and scare them away, it's what everybody else is doing. So.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. I think that's one of the best things, just having patience. I mean, it's super important. So really appreciate you sharing that. You have
Plus, I have a 9-year-old son too, so it's also,
Oh, so you're getting daily practice anyway.
He knows way more than me if you ask him. He knows way more than me. Yeah.
What about superpower? Do you have a superpower?
Boy, I can ramble on. I'd say I'd be the Rambler if I had a super name. But yeah, I don't have a superpower, man. I'm just a guy. I'm just a normal guy.
I like it.
I try to be as honest as I can. I try to educate my clients, and sometimes you can tell on this podcast here, I get on a soapbox and I kind of go on, but I'm passionate about what I do. And I feel that, being open with your sellers and letting them know exactly what you're doing and delivering on what you do is very important. So.
Absolutely. And that's, your honesty, your willingness to be open, transparent, et cetera, as a way that's going to keep you moving in this business. So I would say that is your superpower, and keep at that. Adam, where can the listeners find you? If they want to get more in touch with the auction, if they want to, where should we put it in the show notes for them to reach out to you?
Well, I'll give you my phone number. You can throw it in there. You can email me, Adam@GentryAZ or LemonTreePropertiesAZ@gmail. I'm on Instagram, Facebook under Adam Dahlberg Real Estate. Just give me a call, shoot me a text message. I'm here for anybody, even if, I like doing mentor type stuff too. If there's anybody new that wants to get in the business and, wants to learn, maybe the acquisition side of things, I'd be more than happy to share, any knowledge that I have. I think that, excuse me, there's a lot of people in this business, but there's a lot of room for growth for good people. And I'm never afraid to work with good people, even if I consider them competition or not. We're like I was saying before, the circle of people that really are in this business and in it for the right reasons it gets smaller and smaller every day. And so I like being on the inside of that and helping other people get there as well.
I like that. Well, why don't you, if you're willing to give your phone number, go ahead and shout it out here. We'll add that in the show notes. But if anybody's listening or driving in the car.
Yeah, it's just 480-220-7526.
Okay, good deal.
And then just...
Adam, it's been great having you on here today. Really, it has. I'm excited for all the listeners out there that got a chance to listen to this episode and were able to take this action item, really, and put it into their business. Hopefully we can communicate with them and help them out of a sticky situation. Other than that, man, I really appreciate it.
Any other wholesale deals too. Like, we're not just doing wholesales. We buy and flip a lot of stuff. And we just came across some other really good money partners. So we're sitting on quite a bit of cash right now. So, we're actual buyers too. We try to do most of the acquisitions for ourselves. We do wholesale stuff from time to time, but if you are a wholesaler out there, please, give me a call. I live out in the East Valley. We have 5 people in here that will sit, first priority. You send a deal over, we'll look at it immediately and underwrite it for you right away. So in fact, I got one closing today, so I'm gonna head over there and make sure that they're out and get it done.
I like that, man. I like that. Well, thank you once again for being here, and for all you listeners for sticking with us up to this part of the show. Obviously, that means that you liked it, you learned something out of it. So make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode so that you can share all this wisdom and knowledge with everybody else that you know.
Hey, Scott, I really want to say thank you to you too, bud. And I appreciate what you do with your podcast. I know it's you got to come in here every week, but I've learned a lot off your podcasts and your guests that come on here. You have some big hitters on here, man. I feel honored to be part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you. We'll talk to you real soon.
All right.
Bye. All right, see ya.